the show where business owners share their success stories. Now, here's Shannon Pearson.
You're listening to It's About Business on All Time Favorites AM650. I'm Shannon, and I am talking to Bryan Slusarchuk, Chief Executive Officer of Tirex Resources, and we're bringing up the conversation about the natural resource sector, which is a new conversation on It's About Business, and I'm pretty excited about it because it's very timely right now. You know, the markets are confusing, I think, for a lot of people. We're at a place in our economy that is just making people ask a lot of questions and perhaps getting a lot of contradicting information. So, Bryan, you are very well established in your career as an expert in the natural resource sector. So we were talking a little bit before about the fact that copper and gold is kind of where it's at. They're hard assets, and it's where people can focus and reach out and touch it, and they have something. It's not a concept. It's actually a hard asset that they can depend on.
Well, that's right, Shannon. And I think that most people may have a difficult time with big, grandiose geological concepts or geophysical concepts, but most people can understand the basic premise of the mining business. You explore and you look for an ore body. You discover that ore body with a little bit of luck, and then you get the ore out of the ground and sell it to an end user. So it's a relatively straightforward business. A big difference to me versus that straightforward type of business model are some of the financial companies that we look at around the world. And in the United States, and the banking sector is a good example of that. The banking sector in Europe right now is a good example of that. I challenge even some of the most savvy economists or business analysts to actually dissect the balance sheet of a bank that extensively uses derivatives, that has exposure in multiple continents, etc. The banking business, to me, is a difficult business, and it's a difficult business to assess. And I think part of the reason that people are increasingly interested in the resource space isn't just because there's a great argument to be made for the fact that commodities like copper and gold and silver are going to go higher, but also the simplicity of the business model that's inherent in the sector really strikes a chord with people.
So, you know, there's this perception out there that then banking, those great big conglomerate institutions, are a safer investment versus natural resource, which has had quite a long-standing reputation of being very volatile, very high risk, not good for a retirement portfolio. What's your assessment of that?
Sure, and I understand that that's the common thought out there, and that's a message that's really been hammered home to people by investment advisors, by the mainstream media, that the banking sector is a safe place to be. And I challenge those same analysts, those same commentators, to explain the riots in the streets right now in Greece, or the life savings that have been wiped out due to U.S. banking collapses, or the issue across Europe right now of major banks needing to recapitalize, because if they don't, they're going to go under and wipe out a lot of life savings in the process. The mining business is a risky business. You've got commodity risk, there's exploration risk, there's country risk. There are a lot of risks in every sector, and the mining business is no exception. That being said, I think it's a big fallacy that the mainstream media has created over a number of years, and the financial industry itself has created, that the banking sector is a very safe place to be. I think in Canada, we've been very well served by both the individual banks, by the regulators, and we're in pretty good shape in terms of the Canadian banking system by all accounts. However, across the world, we've seen more devastation of wealth in the past 3 years through the financial sector, much more than we've ever seen in the mining sector.
I remember an article I read, this was years ago, and it was they had a chart, and it was the litigation relative to the size, and one of our largest institutions in Canada was at the top of the list, because relatively speaking, the lawsuits against them were at the top. And some of the more independent firms that, you know, might have had a bad rap, or perhaps they were more involved in natural resource. Yeah, there was some litigation going on, but it wasn't nearly the scale, relatively speaking, to their size that some of these big institutions have. And, you know, I kind of caught a lot of flack for saying it, but I always say they got a bigger broom.
Yeah, and I can see why you'd say that. I think with the mining sector, it gets often painted in with one fell swoop, and people view all mining companies the same. But like any sector, you can get a real variety of risk within the sector, and there's a whole lot of different risk that you can take on or not take on. And like anything, the investments with the biggest potential blue sky always inherently carry the biggest potential risk. So buying a producing gold company that's been in production for 50 years and has never missed a dividend, that's going to be a company that likely carries a whole lot less theoretical risk than an exploration company that's trading at $1 that's looking for the next big discovery. Now, the upside, the blue sky, inherent in that type of proposition is likely going to be larger with the company that has the higher risk profile. But with bigger potential blue sky always comes bigger potential risk.
Yeah, it's the trade-off. It's a classic trade-off in investing.
It is, and not many people understand that trade-off. But what I find unfortunate is that people that invest in the junior mining sector and exploration sector, they realize there are big potential rewards, but there's big risk. They're buying that dollar stock because if it works, it may go to $20. And we've seen that happen many, many times. And it's created a lot of wealth. But they understand there's risk. What I don't like is that during the past several years, you've seen pensioners, people on fixed incomes, and people that can't afford to take risk, who were investing in the financial sector, in the technology sector, etc. around the world, who were in investments because they thought they were safe. And they've been wiped out with the bank failures, with the blow-up of the dot-com era. And I think that what people have to realize is that there's risk, and the risk corresponds with the blue sky, but it's unfortunate when people are putting money into investments they consider very conservative that are indeed inherent with risk because of what the company is doing behind the scenes.
And a lot of times it's perception and direction that they get from the experts that they have in their, in their Rolodex. They go to get advice from somebody, and a lot of times it's opinion. It's based on fact, on research, on the analysts that you're referring to. But it has to be relative, I would think. It has to be relative to the individual, where they're at in their life cycle, what their assets are, so on and so forth. And I've always been a fan of natural resource. I think there's a room for it in every single portfolio, but it has to be relative.
It does. And the other thing that I think is that what holdings in precious metals, and when I say precious metals, I'm referring to gold and silver. Gold and silver holdings can help, if used properly, de-risk a portfolio because they often act a whole lot differently than the core holdings that people are going to have within the mainstream market.
Fantastic. Again, we're talking to Bryan Slusarchuk, Chief Executive Officer of Tirex Resources and an expert in the field of natural resources. We're going to talk to him in a little bit more detail ongoing throughout the weeks every Tuesday night on It's About Business at 6 p.m. We'll talk to you soon.
Do you have a question for Shannon? Go online to shannonpearson.ca to strike up a conversation. This is It's About Business with Shannon Pearson, where business owners share their success stories. There's a lot more still ahead on AM650.